Hi, and evening. Welcome to the Ask the Farmer Q&A session. My name is Brigid Barry and I manage the Farming for Nature initiative. And tonight we are in another one of our Q&A sessions, and we're delighted to be with Trevor Harris, who's in County Kildare. So just quickly, Farming for Nature was set up to inspire and encourage farmers that farm or wish to farm more with nature in mind. And one of the ways we do this is we find exemplary farmers each year who become our ambassadors. And this Q&A session is a great way of learning more from our ambassadors and what they're doing in their farming practices. So over the next hour, myself and my co-host, Brendan Dunford, will be leading the session and asking Trevor a few questions. And then we ask you to put your questions in the chat box. Unfortunately, Trevor's internet isn't working, so we have to do the whole thing through a phone interview. So bear with us. Hopefully it will be good enough. You can let me know through the chat box if it's really not working. But otherwise, we'll do the best we can with what we've got. So on to tonight's session. We're delighted to have Farming for Nature Ambassador Trevor from Kildare joining us. Trevor runs two farms. One is 140 acres, which is cattle and sheep with forestry and cereals. This is both organic and biodynamic. And then he has a second farm, which is horticultural. It's 14 acres where he's growing vegetables for box schemes and retail. Trevor's very passionate about soil health, which is to the fore of his approach of managing his enterprise. And the focus is to build up resilience in the soil through diversity. Trevor, welcome and thank you for joining us tonight.
Thank you, Bridget.
Okay.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so sorry that Zoom isn't working for you. It seems to be every now and again it doesn't seem to work for people. So Trevor, before we start, before we talk about the farm, you might just start with telling me a bit about your own journey into agriculture and this particular farm.
Thank you for having me, Bridget.
Oh, you've joined us, have you?
I think so, yeah. And I got it working.
Very good, excellent. I'm just going to hang up on you now. Trevor, welcome. God, don't you love the old internet and technical difficulties? Thanks.
Isn't it great?
Yeah, isn't it great? Thanks to everyone for your patience, and I'm sorry about the technical difficulties, but there you go. Trevor, so before we talk about the farm, and thank you to Anna, your daughter, for helping us. Before we talk about the farm, you might just start telling us a bit about your own journey into agriculture and this actual farm.
So I suppose I grew up on a farm.
Oh, Trevor, you've just got muted there. Sorry, you have to unmute yourself. Sorry.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, you go for it again. I don't know what happened there. Yeah.
Okay, so I grew up on a farm. My father was a farmer before me, and my grandfather and grandmother would have been farmers as well. So it was sort of always around me, and my journey into farming was reasonably easy as a result of it. At an early age, I had an interest when I'd have days off, or when I was off school in the afternoons, I'd be out looking around the farm and seeing what was going on. And from the age of sort of 8, 9, 10, I was out helping out at what I could help out at. And then as I got to 15 or 16, I would have been working regularly on the farm with my father and with the other men that were on the farm. And I then went on, it was what I wanted to do. I went through the school program and finished the Leaving Cert and went away into Ag College, and was in Ag College for about a year or so. And then I went and worked in Denmark for a period of time. And I was quite taken, this was back in the late 80s, I was quite taken with how environmentally focused the whole farming thing was in Denmark at the time, or at least the government were pushing the farmers to be more environmentally focused, which was quite an interesting thing to see. So when I came back from Denmark, I basically went working with my dad, and we were the farm that my father was running was a beef and tillage farm, and it was we used the full suite of chemicals at the time on the tillage enterprise, and we would have used wormers with the cattle, and we would have finished cattle to beef, and then we would have sold most of the grain to the local mill, a lot of it would have been going for feed. And I was in charge of the whole chemical end of things for the cereals when I started working full time on the farm. I used to source the chemicals, apply the chemicals, and decide which ones we were going to use. And hence I was quite closely associated with dealing with them and with the cost of them and that sort of thing. And it didn't sit well with me. And I had it in my mind that I'd like to be an organic farmer and I'd like to get out on my own. So in my 20s, I rented some land, and that's what I did. I started farming organic. I just saw the whole chemical thing as being unhealthy for me as an operator applying it, and unhealthy for the food, and the whole production of commodities just didn't sort of sit well with me as well. I didn't see much in it for me, so I saw an awful lot more in the organic farming for me. So that's sort of how I got into it all.
It's really interesting. And the farm you now, I was explaining there that you have 140 acres and then a separate farm that's 14 acres. You might just explain to us like how your farming system is and how it's split up, and including kind of aspects of your land type and all that.
So the system, how the farm is set up, it's actually in two separate units. I've been organic farming for a long time in my own right, and producing beef and sheep and cereals. And then in a more recent venture, I got involved in a horticulture unit with another chap about 2 years ago. So that's just a sort of a new thing, and it's a separate unit altogether. And I'm involved in running that, and he's involved in the marketing end of what we produce. So at home, the farm is sort of laid out. It's reasonably flat land, and it'll be seen as reasonably good land, productive. It's a heavy clay type of soil, and I have it laid out in such a way that I have a rotation on the farm, and that rotates around the whole farm. So there's only, I think there's 2 fields in the whole farm that would be permanent pasture, and the rest of it will move into the cereal end of the rotation, move back out of the cereal end of the rotation, and we'll grow herbal lays for a couple of years to aid with fertility building, and then back into cereal production. And on the horticulture unit, it's sort of reasonably level, flat land and reasonably good productive soil as well, but it's a bit more spun out. It would have been rented for a lot of years, and we're just sort of trying to build the structure in the soil and build the fertility in the soil at the moment. And we've an area that we'll rotate the veg and the salads into, and then we move that around the farm. So we have a rotation there as well, and we're only just sort of getting the system set up, and we a little bit of work to do with the soil. So we'll start working cereals into it as well, and probably a bit of grassland. So that's sort of the way.
It's interesting. And so your beef and lamb and cereals in the homestead. So you sell your beef direct, do you? And your lamb, or?
So the beef, I'd sell a certain amount of it direct to restaurants in Dublin, and there's been a little bit of issue with that more recently with the whole COVID thing. So I'd sell some of it direct to restaurants in Dublin, and some of it would go to Slaney Meats, which would feed into the likes of Marks and Spencers and Sainsbury's in the UK and things like that, So I have the 2 markets there, so which is just as well, considering the instability at the minute with the whole restaurant trade, and like their numbers are gone down dramatically. They're doing a certain amount of takeaway food, but it's the footfall is much lower than it normally would be. And then with the veg, it's the same thing. We're tied into a chain of restaurants in Dublin, and it's a chain of restaurants called Sprout Food Co. that are specialised in salads, and their footfall has dropped dramatically as well. So we had to sort of come up with alternatives, and we set up a box scheme for a certain length of time, and we started moving into some of the supermarkets as well with their salads and their veg, just to give us another marketing opportunity, you know, given the circumstances at the moment, so uncertain.
Yeah, you certainly have to be flexible in these times, don't you?
You do, yeah.
Trevor, I'm kind of interested. I mean, you're organic, especially on the homestead, and you use biodynamics. What does that mean in general? And I mean, and then for the quality of your produce and your farm in general, like what does you might explain biodynamics for us, and what do you do on the farm to enhance this or encourage this, and then how do you feel the output is different?
Okay, so I wrote out a piece. You told me you were going to ask me what biodynamics is, and it's quite a complex sort of a thing. So I just sort of thought it through, and I wrote out a piece, and I'll just read that now, and then I'll talk about the food afterwards. So there are many different layers of complexity to biodynamic agriculture, but the central aim is to produce energetic, nutritious food in a sustainable manner while improving the health of the soil that it's produced in, and thus improving the health of anything or anyone that eats what is grown on that farm. The whole farm is seen as a living organism and is treated with respect as a result. The farmer tries to work with the rhythms of nature. There's an appreciation of all the plants and animals that live on the farm. Steiner's agriculture lectures were a response to the degradation of soil health due to chemical agricultural methods. He introduced a set of natural remedies to help to get the natural balance back in the soil, and also a scientific blueprint to work from. For me, as a biodynamic farmers, we work with nature as opposed to fighting it. We take time to observe what is happening around us and use our intuition along with observation and scientific knowledge to decide on a course of action. An example of this is a particular weed. Particular weeds are seen as indicators of either poor soil conditions or nutrient deficiencies that need correction. The two main sprays that we use are horn manure and horn silica. Horn manure is used to help build soil structure, stimulate microbial activity, help build humus, encourage root growth, and improve seed germination. Horn silica is used to improve photosynthesis. It helps strengthen the plant against disease. It also improves the nutritional quality and taste and keeping quality of food. There is also an emphasis on producing high quality compost on the farm, feed soil and create a self-sufficient system. We use a set of biodynamic preparations to assist the process of making compost. Diversity on the farm is encouraged. The desire is to have balance. So by having more diversity of animals, plants, insects, or soil life, we create balance. As they keep each other in check, thus there are less problems. The food produced is connected to the soil it's produced from and the farmer that tends to that soil. This is an evolving relationship and should be ever improving one also. In modern biodynamics, we use detailed soil samples to find exactly what is available to the plant and what is missing. There's a strong scientific background to the modern biodynamics. The idea is that if you get the balance of nutrition right in the soil, you will have a self-sufficient, self-sustaining system. And we use the science available to us to help with the transition process. The aim is that when the farm has transitioned, it will be largely self-sufficient. So that covers a lot of it. Yeah. I wanted to write it out because it you know, there's quite a bit in it, and not to forget anything. But the idea is to have the soil healthy, and once the soil is healthy, and once there's a good humus in the soil, and there's a good mixture of biology in the soil, and the nutrition levels are good in the soil, that will lead to good nutrition levels in the food that's produced, and it should taste great as well.
Right.
So they say nutritious food tastes good. We, as human beings, we're walking around with the lab. We have a nose and a taste buds, and what smells good and tastes good is generally good for you. Now, obviously, with the exception of something like sugar, which industry has cottoned on to, that, you know, we're prone to taking sugar, but it's with everything else, like, you know, with natural food or non-processed food, it's the case.
Okay, cool. In your video, and if people haven't seen Trevor's video, it's a 5-minute long video roughly on our YouTube channel, and it's really fascinating. It's a beautiful oversight on his farm and the work Trevor's doing. But in your video, you mentioned that about 20 years ago, you got a field that was 90 acres, and that you've now spent the last 20 years kind of splitting that up and changing it and improving both the biodiversity, but also how it works for your farm better. You might just explain what you've done, deliberately done, I suppose, both for nature, and then how that's been advantageous to your farming production as well.
Okay, so back in the 70s, the field that you're talking about, it was a farm of it was about 98 acres. And it was all divided up into small little fields, and all the hedges were taken out, and the ditches were all filled in and piped and all this sort of thing, so that it was converted into a huge 98-acre field with loads of different sort of soil types across it, or a number of different soil types across it. So when I inherited the field, we'd worked it as a tillage field for a good number of years, but for my organic system, it wasn't going to suit me to have one massive big area. And also I had it in my mind that it wasn't going to suit my farming practices not to have some level of diversity and somewhere for nature to live. So I sat down with the map and I sort of thought it through and figured out exactly what way I was going to divide it up. I knew I was going to divide it up into certain blocks. So I tried to divide it up into reasonably even sized blocks and reasonably well-shaped blocks that would work well for modern machinery, but to make them much smaller than the 98 acres. And then to add into that, I wanted to have somewhere for nature to live. I wanted to have somewhere to break the wind for the animals and that sort of thing. So I planted, we planted a little over a kilometre of hedges across in various different directions. And we had a mixture of species in that hedgerow. Like, we didn't just go for just the whitethorn. So we whitethorn, blackthorn, honeysuckle, oak, alder, hazel, spindle, and wild cherry. And in planting those hedges, I wanted to have a good thick hedge and have it established quite well. So we planted the plants quite close together, and we let them grow for a few years. And then we coppiced some of them, and we let some of them grow on again, and then we laid them as well. So then what you get is a really thick base, and you have loads of shoots that start to come off at the base. And once that was done, that was seen as the establishment, and we didn't trim them again since. And they've come into these beautiful thick hedges, and there's loads of life in them, and they're allowed to flower every year, and there's loads of food for insects, food, shelter for birds, and all this sort of thing. And they're alive with activity in the summer, and they're generally full of food for birds over the winter as well, which is great. So that was just sort of one of the things we did. And then we also planted a lot of single stand trees. Like, we planted some beech, some oak, some horse chestnut, some mountain ash, some alder as well. And we dotted a lot of these around in rows, and dotted them around the farm in various different spots. And let's see now, we also did some habitats as well. So we did managed habitats and unmanaged ones. One of the managed ones that we have is for the past 15 years, we would have wild bird cover in a couple of spots around the farm, and it's been there for 15 years, and it's just replanted each year. And the diversity that's in those plots is amazing. And in the summertime, like, you can see lots of activity with insects and birds in it as well, and there's plenty of birds in it in the wintertime. And then we've an unmanaged one. We've some forestry as well, but in one of the forestry areas, we've an unmanaged habitat that's just left to do as nature decides to do with it.
Mm-hmm.
And then we planted some forestry as well in a few different areas around the farm. So the forests we planted, we planted oak, sycamore, wild cherry, and then some spruce as well. So various different species, and we have them scattered around in various different parts of the farm, so that it's providing shelter and areas for animals. And then in the future, at some time, there will obviously be a timber harvest from it. But it was areas of the farm that weren't necessarily as productive, and it was areas of the farm that, you know, scattered around, so that it's not just in the one big block as well, you know. And we were trying to avoid monocultures with it, and we planted different trees, different varieties around, you know. So I think that's pretty much everything we've done so far. So we try to do things within the fields to encourage nature as well, but we'll get onto that later on.
Yeah, and I mean, it's great what you're doing for nature, obviously. And do you find, you know, for your animals, it works very well as well, and obviously the stop proofing and stuff like that, and shelter and shade when it's needed. But I mean, have you reseeded any of the grass or any of that, or haven't needed to, or multi-species swords, or?
So like I was saying, that basically there's every field in the farm would come in and out of the tillage rotation. So when it's in the rest period and it's in the beef and sheep production end of it, we have herbal lays. And I've a list here of what we have in the herbal lay. We've meadow fescue, timothy, ryegrass, cocksfoot, smoothstock meadowgrass, red clover, white clover, silk clover, chicory, ivy tonic, burnet, sheep's parsley, yarrow, and plantain. And the combination of that in the herbal lay, along with the diverse hedge that's allowed to grow, it provides a huge level of nutrition for our livestock. And the livestock have access to the hedge and they have access to the herbal lay. And if they run into some nutritional shortage, be it a particular mineral or something like that, they'll find the right plant that's high in that mineral to rectify it. And a case in point was a few years ago, I had trouble with the lambs. At lambing time, they were very poor at suckling. And I was chatting to another farmer, and he was telling me that that's a selenium deficiency. And a while later, I noticed that the same lambs were eating the seeds off the dock heads. So we dock plants and they're eating the seeds, and myself and another farmer were chatting about that, and we reckoned that, like, dock would have selenium in it. It would have a decent amount of selenium in it, and we reckoned that the seeds at the top of the docks where the lambs were going to get their selenium from. So they'd actually were trying to rectify their own deficiency, you know, which is quite amazing. So if you have just a monoculture across your grassland, that it's just ryegrass, they're not going to have the ability to rectify it. They might have the instinct to rectify it, but they won't have the ability. So it's hugely helpful to the animals. And with my opinion is that as humans, we've lost that instinct of what nutritional deficiencies we have and we need. So if you have something like a beef animal or a lamb that's produced on a farm that has that diversity, and the animal can rectify the nutritional deficiencies, then they will have that nutrition in the meat as that you're eating, you know. So it'll be much healthier for the humans because we have lost the instincts.
Mm-hmm. It's like a health food store for the humans compared to McDonald's. Yeah, well done.
Yeah.
Where do you find your advice and support, Trevor, when you're looking for kind of new ideas and stuff? Is there kind of producer groups or organizations you're part of, or any of that? And then I'll be handing over to Brendan there. So is there kind of one top tip you have for farmers where you find advice and support?
So I suppose I'd go to Knott's, really. Knott's do some fabulous courses, and I've done a few of their courses, which is great. I'd go onto YouTube, and like the Farming for Nature being on YouTube is a prime example of that. I'm a member of the Irish Biodynamic Association, and they do open days or special days throughout the year. Not at the moment with the COVID, but normally they'd have days to help you learn how to make preps and things like that. So I'd go along to those, and they do farm walks, and any of the farm walks that yourselves, Farming for Nature, are doing or Chagas are doing can be quite helpful. So there's loads of opportunities. And then I tried to keep a good library of reference books, so that if I have something that's worrying me or something that I need to figure out, that I can go to a reference book. Like the internet is great for information, but when it comes to the finer points of biodynamics or of soil science, you mightn't actually find what you need. It's quite important to have the old standard, the reference books on the shelf to look at as well.
Yeah, to be able to trust your sources. And my co-host Brendan there is going to ask you a few questions. So if anyone has any general questions, we'll be putting them to Trevor in a while. So just write them in the chat box, and feel free to respond to any of the questions if you know the answers as well. Trevor, I'll hand you over to Brendan there. Thanks very much.
Okay.
Yeah, thanks, Brigid, and thanks, Trevor. That was a really interesting kickoff, and I did watch the video before it came on tonight, and it's really fantastic. I mean, just to look at the quality of the veg you grow on there, and the health of the cattle, and just the hedgerows, the whole farm. It's a really beautiful piece of film, and really well narrated by yourself as well. So I'd really recommend that people look at that. I just wanted to ask a few general questions, Trevor, before we get into the technical ones, because I know there's a few practical questions coming in, and please keep them coming. Just in terms of your influences, growing up working on a farm, I suppose that's one set of experiences. Then going to ag college must bring you in somewhat of a different direction, and then the Danish influence as well, which is quite different again. But at this point in time, what motivates you to go from organic to biodynamic, and where are you going from here?
So I suppose that's an interesting question. To go from organic to biodynamic, I ran my farm organically for a large number of years, and it ran reasonably well. And then the land started to get a little bit spun out and wasn't sort of performing nearly as well as it did before. So it seemed like the obvious answer, or where I was getting steered towards was to apply a bit more farmyard manure, or put farmyard manure on. And I did that. And I was applying what I would now call very poorly composted farmyard manure. And I was actually causing more problems than I was solving. And what I've found is that less really well composted manure is actually a much better thing. So I went off, I realized that what I was doing wasn't actually working out very well. And I went off and I started studying. And I did a soils course with a friend of mine, David Wallace, and he opened my eyes to biodynamics. Now, I'd had a bit of an introduction to it prior to that, and then he opened my eyes to the whole soil science thing, and a bit more about what was going on underneath our feet. And the more I learned about it, and the more I learned about biodynamics, the more interested I got in it. So I got involved. I started applying preps, and I could see results. And I started applying preps to compost and doing the compost an awful lot better. And I could see the difference in the effect that compost was having on the soil. So it's been a bit of a slow process in a way, because you learn all this stuff and you want it to work immediately, but it takes time. And I can see now with the soil that it's actually it's changed dramatically, and I can dig a hole in any of the fields and look at the soil, and I now have an idea what I'm looking at, whereas in the past I wouldn't necessarily have. So it was a sort of a slow process going from organic to biodynamic, but it's been a very positive one, so it has.
And just another question on that, maybe from the layperson's perspective, and because I suppose all lay people are consumers as well. Is there a degree of confusion? I know there's a lot of overlap, but between, you know, conventional farming and organic, and then you biodynamic, and I suppose the very strong brand at the moment would be regenerative farming. I know you have stuff like agroecology then in other European countries. There's quite a number of different, I suppose, descriptions with regard to certain types of farming, and obviously there is overlap between them. Would you identify at the moment your system as being biodynamic, but it's very similar to regenerative in many respects, is it not?
Yeah, it would be. There would be similarities. Like we're all heading in the one direction. We're trying to improve soil. You know, that's the main motivation for a biological farmer, regenerative farmer, holistic farming. We're all trying to improve soil and produce healthier food realistically. I suppose the major difference between regenerative and organic is that there is no chemicals in use. They're not allowed. Regenerative might try to reduce the amount of chemicals used, which is definitely a positive step. Organic, there's no chemicals used. And then if you go the one step further from organic to biodynamic, now you're using the preps, the soil remedies, the 501 to help with photosynthesis. So you're taking it that one step further, and the effect, and then you're using the compost preps as well, and the effect that those compost preps have on the compost is incredible. So, you know, so we're all heading in the same direction. Realistically, we all want to produce good food, and we all want to produce it on soil that's improving. But there is a subtle difference.
Which is, I suppose, that's the important thing. It's all heading in the right direction with regard to regenerative and biodynamic and organic as well. I think it's great to see that the increased focus on the soil is really fantastic. Another question on the broader picture. You mentioned a lot the nutritional value of your food, and also the fact that there's lots of carbon benefits, but in a sense you don't necessarily benefit directly financially. For me, there's those added values that you produce. Do you find that a frustration? Can you see ways in which that can be rationalized? Because food isn't valued on the basis of its nutrition. Unfortunately, it's more valued as a commodity at the moment.
Yeah, I suppose for me, I would see a value in the nutrition and a difference in the nutrition of what's produced in Ireland in comparison to some other countries, in organic farming in comparison to conventional, and in biodynamic in particular. Now, I suppose when it comes to the marketing of it, the nutritional level isn't the actual nutritional level of the food isn't being measured, you know. So you're not getting paid for that. When you have the Demeter mark or the organic mark, you do get a percentage more than you would for conventionally or for producing commodities, basically. So, you know, I don't mind, really, to be honest with you. I'm happy enough with what I'm getting paid at the moment, and if it'd be nice to get recognition for the nutritional value of the food that we're producing, because we do put an awful lot of effort into it. But I think people are starting to change their opinions, and they look at what's produced in Ireland, they look at what's produced organically, and they're starting to see more of a value in it without actually having a scientific proof for it, you know. So I think there is a shift.
And have you any direct sales outlets at all, Trevor, or is it just through the Sprout Food Company and through some restaurants that you work with?
So I would sell a small amount direct sales to friends and neighbours, all right, and generally we get a very good response. Like I know when I'm talking about my own family anyway, my daughter said she wouldn't eat steak that anyone else has produced other than her father. She said it just doesn't live up, and it's great to hear that. And anytime we sell to friends and neighbours, obviously they know us well, and they know the effort that's been put into food that's produced. Like we sell a bit of lamb or a bit of beef to friends and neighbours, and there'll be quite positive responses. And Sprout Food Co. would be very tuned into the taste and the quality of the food that they're selling through their restaurant, and they've been very taken with how what we're producing organically out here, how it performs both taste wise and how it stands up to them putting it into a salad and serving it to customers, and their customer base would be very focused on quality of what they sell. So to have them involved is quite a positive mark. So it is really.
And on the supermarkets, because you do supply to supermarkets, do you find that challenging? Is it something you just recently engaged with? Do you see any particular problems or difficulties you've had to deal with there in terms of consistency of supply, etc.?
Yeah, I suppose you've hit the nail on the head there. Really, the consistency of supply is the issue. You know, it's very hard to produce something all year round in Ireland. You know, and that's what the supermarkets sort of need. So you get into a situation where you're trying to replace imports, and the imports can come 12 months of the year, and you can produce maybe 5 or 6. And you know, some of them are understanding and some of them aren't. You know, so we were sort of aiming for the more high end, where they tend to be a bit more understanding, and they appreciate, like their customers are looking for food that's produced in Ireland. Their customers are looking for food that's produced organically, you know. So when the customers are looking for it, the supermarkets will work with you, you know. But it is a difficulty, and the whole marketing end of things in horticulture, it's quite a time consuming, and it's an extra job, definitely. So in our situation, it actually works quite well, because I'm working out in the fields and the production end of things, and my partner, he's working on the marketing end of it, you know. So the two of us work quite well together. So he'll work on the sales and the marketing end of it, which is a job in itself. Yeah.
Fascinating. Just in terms of what you do and how you do, Trevor, it does sound like there's quite a labor-intensive activity in some cases. How do you manage? Is it difficult to get support for harvesting and for particular times of the year when you might need a bit more help?
Well, so far we've been quite lucky. Like, I've quite a big family here. We've 5 kids, so I had 3 of them working with me all summer, and during the initial lockdown with the COVID, we'd 3 of them working with us, and we'd a number of young people from the locality as well, and then we've a couple of local people. So we'd 8 people working in the fields, and it's when we started the year, and I knew the sort of level of production that we were going into, I was quite worried as to whether we'd actually find staff that worked well, and thankfully we did. We found plenty of able bodies, and they all worked hard, and they all got on with each other, which was quite important. And it's a sort of a funny thing. I've said it to a few people. I remember back years ago when I started out at farming, when I was sort of 14 or 15, and we were cereal farmers. So the square bale was the thing at the time, and we used to produce huge numbers of square bales. Like, we'd produce 10, 12,000 square bales in the year, and they'd all have to be brought into the shed and stacked in the shed, and all the stacking that was involved in the field, and then loaded out of the shed and sold, and all this sort of thing. And there was a lot of people around, and we worked really hard. There'd be 5 or 6 of us working on those bales, but we'd always have quite a social time and a bit of banter and that sort of thing, and find out what was going on in the community, all this sort of thing. And that sort of disappeared. And I spent the time as a farmer sitting on a tractor on my own out in the field, and I'd see the family in the evening time and that, and it'd be a solitary enough sort of an environment. So to go back to the horticulture thing and working with a group of people was quite enriching. So it was, I have to say, you know, I have to say I really enjoyed it. And it's great to see job opportunities in the community with the horticulture as well. You know, it sort of opened my eyes quite a bit, you know. And I was surprised to be able to find people that were willing to work in it, because it is hard work, like, you know.
Yeah. I think that's a really interesting point. I mean, we're talking tonight a lot about the environmental value of what you do, but I think there's a whole huge social dividend to that type of farming as well, which we often overlook. I know we talk a lot about rural decline, but I think part of the solution, certainly, as you described there, Trevor. Last general question. I suppose what you do is exceptional, and if anybody wanted to buy food, I'm sure it's the type of food you produce is what we'd all love to have. But I guess we have this climate and biodiversity crisis now. We have a farm income crisis in a lot of sectors of Irish agriculture. Where do you see the big change coming from, or do you see a big change? I suppose we feel we need a big change. We possibly know how to do it with role models like yourself and many of the other farmers we've met. But what do you think? Where do you think the change will come from? From the consumer, from the policy? Where can you see change and at that scale, and where might it come from?
I suppose I'd see that it sort of has to come from the top down. Really, it has to be from policy. Like you'll have a certain amount of consumer sentiment that would like to see more biodiversity, but they won't really have any knowledge of how to encourage that, or how to what they'd necessarily like, or what would be positive, you know. And there can be an awful lot of push towards things that don't necessarily give that much positive gain. So what you really want is to have solid science or solid information that what is going to be done will actually give the positive gain that is required. It needs to come from policymakers realistically, and it needs to come from people that do have a knowledge of biodiversity, do have knowledge of nature, you know, to them to lead policymakers with what way to push things. Like I'm involved in the EIP project with the Biodiversity Centre, and that's quite an inspiring thing. So it is what they're doing. They're measuring the level of biodiversity on farms, on loads of different farms across Kildare and Laois, and they're then telling farmers to do certain things to improve the biodiversity, and then they're going to measure again to see if those actions actually gave the biodiversity gains that they expected, or what gains they gave, and then they'll be able to quantify as to what are the right positive actions to take. And that's the sort of thing that will lead to real change. You know, if you have information on an actual biodiversity gain by a particular action, then people know what they can do. And farmers are keen to have, the majority of farmers want their farm to improve, and they are friends of nature. The majority of farmers do have an interest in nature and would like to do things, but they need the knowledge of what to do. So I see things like that project as being very important.
Fantastic, and I think we shared their annual report on social media recently, but it's a very interesting project indeed. I think Sorla is running that one. We'll get on to that. I could talk about these things all night with you, Trevor. Thanks so much for your insights. On to food practical questions, of which are a number. Claire Lyons, first of all, is curious to find out more about how you're using weeds as indicators of nutrient deficiencies and soil pattern.
Okay, so let's see now. What I do generally is, if I have a problem weed, or a weed that's starting to become dominant in a field, I'll research that weed as to what conditions it likes to grow in, and that's I've a number of books that I use for the research, and I look up on the internet, and I'll talk to other farmers and advisors and things like that. So I'll give you an example. I had a problem with docks, which there's plenty of people would have problems with docks. Now, I don't mind having docks in my fields at all. It's just if they start to get out of balance. And as a biodynamic farmer, I'm all about things being in balance. I don't mind anything really being on the farm as long as it's not taking over. So I had one field that had an issue where the docks were starting to take over. So I know my own soil to a degree. So I knew that there was a few things going on. Number one, there was compaction in the field. the field was a little bit low in boron. The calcium availability was a bit of an issue, and sulfur was an issue. And the doc was telling me about the compaction, it was telling me about the boron, it was telling me about the calcium, and it was telling me about the sulfur. So what I did was I picked the right time and I ran a subsoiler through the field. I applied sulfur, I applied boron to the crop that was growing. And the following year, without doing anything else, there was a 70% drop in the amount of docks in the field. So, and then it was starting to come back into balance, where I would be less worried about it. Now, the thing about the dock though is that it has all sorts of nutrition in it. Like it has calcium, iron, magnesium, manganese, selenium, copper, zinc, phosphorus. All these minerals are in the dock. So I'm happy enough to have a certain amount of it in my fields for my cattle and sheep to access, and they do eat them. And I was talking to another farmer, and he told me that in a situation where there is no chemical nitrogen fertilizer going onto the soil, the dock becomes more palatable. When you're putting chemical nitrogen onto the soil, it makes the dock bitter and it's unpalatable to the animals. But when my animals go through the fields, they will actually eat the docks, and they're getting all those nutrients from. So just to come back to the initial question, I just sort of research the particular weed and see what conditions it likes, and then I decide what are those conditions I want to rectify on my farm, that it won't have them anymore, you know.
Great. Thanks, Trevor. Brian Walsh wants to know, what is your cereal rotation? How many years do you have organic oats, one plot of land? Do you sow spring or winter oats? Thank you.
So my rotation would be, I'd start off with a crop of barley, then I'd have a crop of, generally have a crop of barley or oats as second year. Then I go into a combi crop, cover crop, and then I finish up with oats. And then I'll go back to herbal lay for about 2 years, and then start back with the barley. Now, at the combi crop, cover crop is an interesting sort of a one. It's a sort of a polycrop that I've just started growing. It's only a new thing for me, and it's a huge boon for soil fertility, but it's also a huge boon for nature. So I try not to grow any monocrops. When I'm growing the barley and I'm growing the oats, I'll also have a trefoil or a similar legume, maybe a black medic or something like that in the base of it. I'll plant sunflowers with it as well. So like I'll plant maybe about 100 or 200 grams of sunflower seeds per acre. So there'll be sunflowers dotted through it. I might plant some alliums in as well. So there's a bit of diversity that's in the oats and the barley. But then when I get to the combi crop, which is quite a popular thing in organic farming, that you grow something like peas and barley together, or peas and barley and oats, I'll expand on that. So I have at the moment I grow peas, barley and oats as my combi crop. So that's then combined, and the grain goes for animal feed. But when I was growing cover crops, and what I was finding was that the more diversity you have in your cover crop, the better it is for the soil. But generally, I'd be growing spring crops, so I'd be harvesting rather late, and it's too late to get diversity into the cover crop. And then it's growing over the winter, and it doesn't really grow an awful lot, and your options are reduced. So I decided that when I'm growing the combi crop, I then bring the diversity of the cover crop into that in a summer situation. So I'll also plant, let's see now, sunflowers, linseed, vetch, alliums, and then birds for trefoil, along with the peas, barley, and oats. So then you've this huge diversity of roots in the soil, this huge diversity of flowers above the soil, and the insect life and the bird life that's going on around that is amazing, you know. And
yeah,
the life it brings to the soil is brilliant.
I think it was aptly described in your video as a very happy field. It's what
That's the one, yeah.
Described it as. Fantastic. Clear Lines wants to know what you plant for the wild bird cover.
So it's just it's a very simple barley and linseed mix, and then there's loads of wildflowers and what would be seen as weeds elsewhere that grow. So the barley and the linseed is sown reasonably thinly, and all this diversity comes up through it because it's been wild bird cover plots for so long. But it's a fairly basic mix. Sometimes I throw a few of the other different things that I have in the combi crop, cover crop into it as well. But the main thing is the barley and the linseed.
Okay. And just one final question for myself with regard to rust. I don't know if you can hear me there. Sorry, Trevor. Rust. Do you have rust? Yep. And what is that a sign of? Do you think, in your experience? I know some people have problems with it on their cereal crops. Others have problems with it on their chives, apparently. But what do you think it's a sign of in cereal crops?
So I suppose it's a sign of a weak plant to a degree. Now, as to why the plant is weak, you'd have to see the actual plant and the site more specifically. Like it could be to do with a silica deficiency would be what would jump out at me really. That'd be the first thing I'd think of. But without knowing the plot, it's very hard to sort of say.
Perfect. So Trevor, just on to, I'll just take over there from Brendan there. Thanks very much for all of that. There's a question here from Shane O'Brien. Would it be possible for Trevor to talk about his relationship with the abattoir he works with and regulations to do with selling direct? Thanks.
Okay. So let's see now, the relationship I'd have, I'm actually just after changing abattoir because the abattoir I was working with, their systems don't really suit me anymore. So I'm just starting off with a new relationship with the new abattoir, and I've literally only put one animal through with them. But I suppose in the past, the one I was dealing with, I had a good relationship with them, and it worked well. It's a bit of a drive. The distance to the abattoir, it's about 50 minutes of a drive, which is a bit problematic. There was a time when there was an awful lot of abattoirs around the country, small abattoirs, and it was much more simple to do the direct selling. But now it's become more difficult. From the regulation point of view, I have a HACCP plan in place, and I just I have the few HACCP books, and I keep the records of temperatures of meat and that sort of thing when I'm moving it. I'm generally dealing with frozen meat. So the restaurant I'm dealing with, they're happy enough to take in frozen meat. I get the abattoir to flash freeze it. And when you flash freeze it, it doesn't have the same crystallization process as when you freeze it slowly. So the restaurant's happy enough with it that way. And the whole HACCP thing around frozen meat is much simpler to deal with. Interesting,
yeah. Jim Hogan has asked, can you ask Trevor about your composting and your dung management?
Okay, so let's see now. I've been working on the dung and the composting for a long time, and last year I think was the first time I was actually happy with the end product. So what I do is I have a list of things that I add to it, and they are I'd add clay. So about 10% of the weight of the compost heap I'll add of it will be clay. I'll add sand. So the clay, the idea of the clay is it's a binding property. It's somewhere for all the nutrients to bind. There's cation exchange sites on the clay, and that's where the nutrients can sit safely so that they won't leach. I add sand, which has a certain amount of nutrition in it, but it's also adding sort of adding space to it gives space for air to get through the heap. I had basalt dust, which has a load of nutrition in it. There's all sorts of nutrients in it. It has silica, iron, calcium, magnesium, manganese, phosphorus, potash, sulfur, cobalt, copper, and zinc in it. So you're adding all those nutrients, and rock dust would be seen as a really positive thing to have on your soil or in your compost from a biodynamic point of view. And basalt dust is seen as the best of the lot. So I'd add a bit of that. I'd add wood chip or leaves. Add a bit of sulfur, a bit of lime, soft rock phosphate. I add some organic milk, molasses, seaweed extract, and then add the biodynamic preps. And if I was to not add all the rest of the stuff and just add the biodynamic preps, I'd be far happier than to add all the rest of the stuff and not add the biodynamic preps. I see them as hugely important. Like the 6 of them are yarrow, chamomile, nettle, oak bark, dandelion, and valerian. And they have different roles in helping the various different minerals be broken down and be stored safely within the compost. So what I do is basically when I have the cattle come into the shed, and before they come into the shed, I put a layer of clay down, then I put a layer of sand over that, a layer of basalt dust over that, and then the leaves or the wood chip go on top of that, and then I start bedding it with straw. And as the bed builds up, I'll add the sulfur and the lime and the soft rock phosphate. And then when we get to a certain depth, when we get to a depth of about 1.5 feet, 2 feet, I'll add the compost preps. So then it's all in the farmyard manure, and the breakdown process has started before I take it out of the shed. And when it comes out of the shed, I'll put it into a windrow, and I leave the windrow build up in temperature. I'll monitor the temperature until it goes over 60 degrees. And when it gets between 60 and 65 degrees, I'll turn the heat to let air into it and stop it from overheating. And then I'll monitor it. That's usually about 5 to 7 days after it's come out of the shed. It'll want to be turned. And then I'll turn it again when the temperature comes up high again. So this will happen possibly 4 times. But I'll monitor the temperature. I don't want it going over 65 degrees because then you're starting to lose carbon and you're starting to lose nutrition out of the heat when you go over that temperature. But you want to get it up to around 60 degrees at some point to kill off pathogens and weed seeds. And then I just leave it sit there for, once it's settled, I leave it sit there for a couple of months. And last year I took the farmyard manure out of the shed in January, and I was able to spread it. I'd be happy with the compost that I was spreading in April, which was great. I was delighted that it broke down so quick. But you can leave it sit there for 6 or 8 months as well, you know.
Trevor, I feel like I'm listening to like a Michelin star chef of farming or something. It's a very, very detailed but very thought through. It's amazing and very interesting. Just very quickly on your preparations, do you make them or do you buy them in?
So I'm happier to make them myself, you know. So I'd make 500, and I've made horn silica and horn manure. The compost preparations are much more technical to make. So I'll make some of my own horn manure and horn silica, and I'll buy it in. And the compost preparations, I just buy it all in, and it comes in from Biodynamic services in France. It's Vincent Masson's company, and he's very particular about how he makes his preps. And the way I look at it is that it's important for the preps to be made on the farm that they're used, but there's an awful lot of effort goes into actually applying the preps, and there's I count an awful lot on the preps working properly in the compost. So it's very important that they're done right, and if they're not made properly, they won't work properly. So I'm not technical enough yet to make the compost preps, you know. So.
It's a whole skill in itself. No, it's fascinating. Trevor, just one final question there. If you were to give a top tip to every farmer in Ireland, like any conventional farmer in extensive or intensive land, could, you know, bring onto his farm, what would it be?
So I suppose my tip is to make room for nature. It's very important for your farm and to make room for diversity. And the easiest way to do that is to let the hedges grow a bit and leave a bit of space around the hedges, and not necessarily have to farm right up to 6 inches from the stump, you know. And nature will pay you back in the sense that that diversity will help what you're growing in the fields, be it it'll help your livestock's health, it'll help your plant's health. So just make a bit of space for nature, and letting hedges grow is definitely the easiest way to do that.
Brilliant, excellent.
And it's surprising, you know, it's sort of seen that the hedges will take over the field, but they really don't, you know. It's not in my experience.
It helps to have cattle as well. Trevor, listen, that was amazing. So really inspirational, and so much expertise and knowledge. And, you know, there's a lot there that we could keep going for a few hours, but unfortunately we've hit our time limit, so we're not going to. And like I said, if anyone hasn't seen Trevor's video, please check it out on our YouTube channel. So it's up there. It's about 5 minutes long, and it's a really nice overview of his farm. The recording of tonight's session will also be up on YouTube by tomorrow afternoon. So feel free to check it out and share it with people. You know, they're really easy to listen to in the car or the tractor or wherever. Not that we're all driving long distances at the moment, but you know, in your 5K, you can drive around and listen to it. Hopefully over the summer, at some stage, we might have a farm walk on Trevor's farm, and a lot of our other ambassadors are having walks, you know, restrictions allowing. Our farm walks will be opening up mid to late summer. If you have any questions, we do have an online forum, and this is a great way to ask some farmers any question that you have about farming, but also our ambassadors often respond within. So next week we have Stephen Morrison, who's another farmer from County Kildare. And so if you'd like to join, please just register through farmingfornature.ie. It's on our homepage. You can find the link and register. But meanwhile, Trevor, thank you so much. That was really fascinating. Thank you so much for your time. Brendan, is there anything you'd like to ask or answer? Or
just to add my thanks to Trevor. That was quite an education there, Trevor. I feel so ignorant in some ways of the complexity and the wonderful detail that's involved in farming at your level. I think, as Brigid said, you're like the Michelin chef of composting. But thank God then for the simplicity of your final recommendation around hedgerows. Just leave them alone, let them grow, because I think that we've destroyed so many of our hedgerows in recent years. And I'm just glad, I guess, that Pollinators EIP is harvesting some of your amazing knowledge, and Andrew from last week as well, and the likes of Kim McCall as well, because I think you farmers have so much to offer, not just in terms of inspiration, but of knowledge and of ideas for the future. So thank you so much, and keep up the amazing work. Thank you.
Thanks to everyone for joining us. We'll see you all next week. Thanks, Trevor. Take care.
All right, thanks.